Welcome to Science of Slink, the evidence-based pole podcast with me, your host, Dr. Rosie Boa. And just to be very clear, I'm not a medical doctor. I cannot treat or diagnose. I'm the type of doctor that does research and reads research articles. And that's part of what we're going to be doing together here in the podcast. We're going to be reading research. We're going to be synthesizing that down into things that you can apply to your pole practice. We're going to be talking with experts in their field and learning more. And overall, just really building our understanding of how bodies work, how we can do pole better, train more effectively, train more safely, and just have a better time overall. So if that sounds like something you're interested in and you want to come get a little bit nerdy with us, come on in. Welcome to the Science of Slink podcast with, I was going to say special guest, but I feel like all my guests are special. But this is a special episode. You may have noticed it's off the usual publication schedule because I'm joined by Jessica John, who some of y'all may know as Circus Mobility on Instagram, who is the creator of the Unraveling Myth of Flow Summit, which I think it just says Myth of Flow Summit if you're watching on YouTube, but that is the full title. And it is, if you are listening when this come out, this weekend. So if Jessica seems tired, that's why. Yeah, so why don't, for folks who don't know you, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about who you are, your background. I know you do pole, but that's not like your main focus, I would say. So a little bit about where pole fits into your movement life.
Yeah, so I am Jessica John. I am the founder of Circus Mobility, which I started, oh gosh, maybe 10 years ago now. I found aerial arts in my mid-30s after a background of being a competitive tennis player and a dancer, and I hesitate with dancer because I wasn't a very good one, but I really loved it. So I kept at it for a long time, and sometimes persistence pays off. But I had lost my way with movement a bit and focused on making money, building a career, going to law school, going to work for the government in DC, and I was not feeling in my body, and I just happened to find aerial at that time. Went all in, was very excited. I felt like, the that feeling when you're a kid and you climb high up in the tree and you're like, this is amazing. I'm on top of the world. That's what aerial felt like for me. I signed up for my first class, and then I immediately went the next day and the next day, and I couldn't walk, but it was great. So I really became a bit obsessed, and it started to take over my life. And next thing I knew, I didn't like my day job so much anymore. I wanted to focus more on aerial. And at some point, I guess maybe 5 years ago at this point, I made the full switch over to Circus full time. But there's a little bit of an interlude there, which was an in-between space where I was still hating my day job, but doing a lot of circus, and I found my way to Macedonia. We're taking a detour here. I found my way to Macedonia because I was working for the government, and it sounded like a fun thing to do. And there was no aerial there. So I bought a pole and I brought it with me to Macedonia. And that is what I did while I was in Macedonia. And then I came back and got back into aerial, but continued to do some pole on the side. And that's how I ended up working with a lot of pole dancers as well as aerialists. So now today, full-time circus, full-time coaching aerialists and pole dancers, all online, which 100% went over when the pandemic happened. And now I'm here with a summit, a big big unwieldy summit, but I'm stoked.
Yeah, I would say just as a presenter, it's been a lot of moving parts, and I know that you have an order of magnitude more. So,
Yes.
but I think it will very much be worth it, and it's something I'm really just like looking forward to attending as well, because and folks who listen to the podcast regularly know I'm not really doing in-person stuff that's not like outdoors, and there's not a lot of pole stuff, like pole community stuff, where you can do that. Like this PoleCon, which is actually I'm in Virginia, so it's quite close to me, or has been the past 2 years. But unfortunately, just like not sort of in my envelope of tolerance, I would say at the moment. But being able to have like this online community where we can bring together. Well, you're bringing together. I'm just showing up. A lot of folks who have similar interests. I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. And I'm also really excited about this overlap of pole and aerial because it's gotten so big. And a lot of times we are merging cultures, different cultures,
very different,
and learning from each other, and sometimes using words that we don't understand what the other person is saying. And I've just noticed this a ton coaching both. And I think that there's so much that people can learn from the other. So that's one of the things I'm looking forward to the most.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say one of my personal themes of the year and professional themes of the year has really been cross-pollination. I think this is a good example of that. Because yeah, there is, I don't know that there's beef necessarily, but certainly historically in aerial spaces, I think there is or at least what I've received has been not like looking down on pole necessarily, but like a sort of a wariness, in particular when pole studios add aerial equipment with maybe not the same degree of rigor around things like rigging and training that I think a lot of aerial specialists have come to enjoy. But I mean, I think it's also helpful to sort of think about these things in terms of timelines, right? Because I'm a pole person. I don't know when the first like recreational aerial studio was founded, but people have been professionally training to be aerialists for many more decades than they have. Like pole has existed as a career even inside of strip clubs, right? Like if we think about apocryphal origins of pole in like the 1920s, we full on had trapeze by that point. Like that was a career you could have, was trapeze artist. And this is before like pole dance is really a thing in the cultural milieu in which it came to exist. So yeah, kind of kid sister energy, I would say, a little bit.
Yeah, and at the same time, although aerial has been around longer, and I would say the aerial as we know it emerged really about the 1950s, but there was no recreational aerial. It was only professional. And I would say that pole is more well developed from the recreational side of things than aerial is, because there can be more spaces for pole. It's easier to, find a building in your town and put poles up and have a pole studio. It's a lot more complicated for aerial. That just wasn't a thing until recently. So the emergence of so many more aerial spaces actually is because of pole. Right? It was all these big circus schools that really weren't designed for recreational aerialists. It was like, okay, we're training the pros, but we need to make some money. So let's do some recreational folks as well.
Yeah, that was something I was thinking about when you were sort of sharing your story, is that I feel like it is very rare. And again, I hang out with pole people, so I've got a sampling bias, for someone to have started with aerial and then moved into pole. Usually you'll see the other way around in my experience.
And that was my experience too, until recently. I find that there are a lot more people that are going the other direction, and that the pandemic started that.
That makes sense.
Because people didn't have access. And again, they could just put a poll up in their house. And so you have a lot more people with a lot of experience in aerial, just brand new to pole and brand new to pole and thinking they know something or two that they absolutely do not. A lot of people throwing themselves around a pole because they're strong, but don't exactly look the way they want to look or think that they look before they look at the video.
Yeah, and it feels very different. I know this is to be released. I'll share it on my channels. We're having a separate conversation about this in another sort of thread that y'all can listen to. But pole is weird if what you're used to is a single point or a double point hanging apparatus. It, like, a lot of your assumptions about how things move and work just don't apply. And I think the other big thing that coming from pole to aerial is very different is thinking about contact points and stickiness, unless of course you're doing like a wrapped pole, which I know are becoming more and more common. But then you're not really going to have access to all of the types of flavors of movement that I think really certainly encapsulate that American, strip club derived sensual pole style. And probably you're going to end up with movements that are more suited to that type of pole. So thinking more like the Chinese pole style, which of course are separate traditions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also interesting to me. One of the speakers at the summit is Marlo Fiskin, who has an entire methodology around inversions on pole. And the way she thinks about inversions and the way that I think about inversions are so different, so different. And it is very much informed with those contact points. What is necessary for inverting on pole versus what is necessary for inverting in the air without any leverage. And that means that we're approaching it from a completely different lens. And that is the beauty of getting aerialists and pole dancers together, is because we're coming at things differently, and those differences are going to work better for some people and other things work better for others. And sometimes you don't know that until you see the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, cross-pollination, right? I'm sort of considering like doing like a nice wall art of it or something, because it's just like it's been on the mind a lot for me recently. I think the summit is really gonna bring together a lot of the. I mean, obviously there's gonna be some like big pole names. You mentioned Marlo. I know Heidi Coker's gonna be there. My mind is blanking. Yep. From Finding a Freestyle, yes, for folks might know. I think she's out of New York, so I think probably more East folks would be familiar with her.
All of the old school body and pole people know Tracy very well.
I know there's a bunch of other folks, and I'm just literally, we're recording this in my quite late evening, and my brain's no good anymore. I've used it all up.
We have Stacy Shapiro and Dr. Emily Rausch. I'm probably forgetting another pole person.
Yeah. And then of course, just like other folks that I think are really cool.
Sergio.
Of course. Duh, speaking of big pole names. Like Emily Sherb, who's been on the podcast before, who's wonderful. Nikita from Fit and Bendy, probably one of my favorite like applied anatomy educators. She's so good. If you're not subscribed to her YouTube channel, y'all, you should definitely go do that. She posts a lot of fantastic educational content. Would definitely recommend that. So just a really good group.
Yeah, it is. And I've been assembling a list for a while now. Kind of this idea has been percolating for the summit for probably about a year. Probably a year ago is when I told people I was thinking about doing it. And I've been keeping a list of, anytime someone puts out content that I think, oh, that would be a really good topic, I want to hear them talk about it more. I've put them on the list. So this really is like the people that I respect, the people that I want to hear more from, who also work in the online space. Because it would be one thing, I could bring together a ton of experts who have deep expertise and you can hear from them, and that's great. But then if you want more, you can't work with them. Like, that's it. That's all you get. Whereas here, all of these people work online.
Which is, as someone who also trains online, right? Well, I have recently started training in person a little bit, well masked in like a very small class, but yeah, almost all, almost all online. So I am very excited to, find new folks to move with.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. So before we get too deep into the conversation, and I forget to ask you, I will have a link to sign up down in the down there. But if folks wanted to join, what should they do? This, we've talked about all these wonderful experts. This has got to be expensive. I was like, I can't do this with a straight face. It's free.
Set this up. It is a free summit. Go to the link down wherever that Rosie has. It's totally free. You get access to all of the speaker presentations for 48 hours. So there's a lot. If you are the type of person that will look at that and get total overwhelmed by the possibilities, there's a little quiz you can actually fill out and write in all of your preferences about what you want to learn, and it'll spit out a schedule for you, which is awesome. And yeah, after the 48 hours is up, if you want to continue to have access, you can buy the VIP pass. You don't have to, but that is there. And in addition to all the speakers, you get access to all of these bonuses. So most of the speakers have contributed a free course or month in their membership or program that you can choose to opt into as a VIP Pass member. And then there are also a few different live events, including 2 panels and some daily movement sessions that you get as well. So you can do the totally free experience, or you can upgrade and get a lot more content.
So I'll have a link below, and I'm trying to talk about it on Instagram and emails and stuff, because I know that somebody sends you an email, I'm like, oh, that's cool, I'll definitely do that, and then the email gets marked as read, and then like a week later I'm like, what was it that I was saying that was cool that I wanted to do this weekend that I put on my calendar? So I will definitely be not bothering but reminding you occasionally.
And I've definitely gotten a lot of messages that's like, oh, I'm going to be out of town, shoot. And I'm like, you can buy the VIP pass.
Yes. My talk is actually going to be bringing together some different like strands of research that I think are very relevant to people who are interested in finding flow and freestyle, and digging into them a little bit. And I want to leave you with 3 little tips you can take and try in your home freestyle practice to hopefully have it feel better or not, right? Like, it's an empirical question. Like, I think that these are 3 things that for most people are going to make an improvement, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to be an improvement for you. So those of you who come and watch, I am going to be very interested to hear what your experiences are, because I love an experiment.
Yeah, and you were talking about the research. I think that's one of the things that kind of the thread that binds all of the people in this summit together, is that I've assembled people who have a lot of thoughts on this topic, both from really long, deep practices themselves, or from their educational and movement backgrounds that are all a little bit different, but everyone has this very, I'm gonna say nerdy quality.
You can say nerdy. It's okay.
I'm gonna go with nerdy here as far as like this type of stuff lights us up. And so what you're getting from the speakers is really something that they're super excited to talk about, which isn't always the case.
Yes, I'm really excited for people to see my talk and to talk more about it. Yeah, I'm kind of considering putting together a bibliography of all the stuff that I talk about and posting it in the so if you all sign up, there's I hope I'm not giving anything away. There's a Discord.
Yes, there was a community group on Discord.
Yeah, I'm thinking of pulling together all my citations and sharing them on Discord as well, because I think that'll be helpful for folks if they want to dig more into some of this research.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
And we can keep talking about this, but I don't want to change the subject.
Talk about other things.
Yeah. There's something that I have just been like, speaking of like people who think a lot about these sort of things, there's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently that I just sort of want to pick your brain about, and I have you and we're recording, so 2 birds, 1 stone. And that is, I'm going to preface this by talking about dogs. So, have you done much dog training? Like, have you ever done like, I know you're a cat person.
But I've done cat training.
Okay, so same thing.
Yeah, I've done clicker training with cats.
Okay, you're familiar. So one of the big challenges with training animals, I will just say broadly, is that we train in specific situations and they don't generalize, right? Like you can train, let's say your dog to go down this set of stairs if it's scared of it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the dog is then going to go down a different set of stairs later on, right? Like the specificity of the training and the level of the specificity is way more fine-grained than I think humans tend to think it is, because we have things like a semantic concept of stairs, and like we've extended this to everything in that class, but the dog didn't. And I've really been thinking about this concept as it applies to movement and training and specificity of training. And this was really sparked for me. So there's a paper that recently came out, 2024, I think, Journal of Circus and Performing Arts, possibly, looking at sort of normative qualities of pre-professional circus artists, right? So people who aren't working professionally as circus artists yet, but are sort of training. And one of the things they looked at was grip strength. And they found that for circus artists, grip strength, no greater than the general population, about average for women and then slightly lower for men. But grip endurance, they hypothesized, probably much greater. But I think that for a lot of people, a priori, if you just ask them, you'd been like, hey, do aerialists have strong grip strength? They'd have been like, yeah, of course. But I've really been thinking about it. And we, like, personally, I do some grip strength training off the pole, off the apparatus, but it's almost all in relation to weight training, right? Like it is not in relation to what I'm specifically doing on the pole. And I've just really been thinking about all of the ways in which we think we are cross-training. We think the thing that we are doing is going to result in a physical change, and it doesn't, and we get blindsided by it later on. So I'm wondering, A, when do you find this showing up most often with your, not patients, clients, coaching clients, students, etc.? I don't know what you call them. And B, do you think it's that big a deal? Because I've been thinking about it, and I think when you mentioned, aerialists coming to pole, I think there's like an assumption that a lot of stuff that's going to transfer just doesn't, and vice versa, right? Like you can have a beautiful aerial invert on pole, and you try and get up on the rope for the first time, and you're just like, whoop, oh no, who made my butt heavier? Why can't I do it here? And A, the biomechanics are different. But B, like a lot of the assumptions that you've made about the generalizability of your motion just aren't there. You've been training something very specific. Anyway, discuss.
Yeah. I think, well, our bodies adapt to the demands that we place on it. So that is always happening with aerial, right? And our body is generally speaking, leaning into our efficiencies, right? We are trying to make it easier on ourselves, or our bodies are trying to make it easier on us. So over time, that's all getting more and more and more ingrained. And the way we train oftentimes ingrains those pathways even more, even though we could choose to train a different way, which would open up movement possibilities and put us in a position that we wouldn't feel what you described. But we don't, because again, generally speaking, we are training skills, at least in aerial, and repetition. Well, I mean, this is skill acquisition, right? The way you achieve skills is to repetition without repetition, but doing the same thing over and over. So because of this, we get really good in really one small arena. And then as soon as we ask people to deviate from that, then it gets hard again. But if we have developed capacities outside of that pathway, then it should be easy to get it again, because it's just learning a difference of the skill, but the capacity for the movement is there. If you're not training the capacity, so if you're not doing strength training, if you're not doing mobility training, well, then no, you might just have that one really, really small little lane, and that is it. That's all you have in your body. So it just exposes the lack of, I'm going to say, well-roundedness in our movement, that is sort of like the way studios are designed is putting us at a deficit. So if you take a Lyra class, you could go to Lyra every week and you're getting Lyra. And maybe you get a warm up, but if you're talking about an hour class, you're getting a little bit of a warm up, which may be completely different depending on the instructor you go to. Some skill-based work. Maybe if you're lucky, there is some freestyle improvisation or phrasing, sequencing at the end. That's it. Where is the mobility training? Where is the strength training? It's not there unless you're doing it on your own. So we don't design full curriculums, full training plans, generally speaking, as aerial instructors or pole instructors. So it's just not happening. And that deficit means that people just don't have the ability or the capacity in their bodies to quickly pick up variations from the strict skills that they've learned.
I did not pay Jessica to say this at all, but I think what you've brought up is really the crux of why I have designed my studio and membership the way that it is, right? So my members know this. Also, by the way, there will be doors opening on the membership at some point soon, so keep your eyes open on that. Where it's 3 hours a week, half an hour mobility, half an hour strength, an hour of freestyle, just like that's the whole class, and then an hour of pole skills training. And so also we have a members only, like, bring the thing that you want to work on time once a month. And last time we did it, one of my students who has not inverted ascending rather than descending for a couple of years, and when she was working on it was having a lot of back pain. We were working on some skills, and I was like, oh yeah, you know, I was offering it, you know, you could ascend into this invert if you wanted. And she just did. And she was shocked, like very pleasantly surprised. And the next day she messaged me and she's like, my back feels great. And that variation, right? Like that ability to introduce new things into your movement like you said, comes from building that capacity. And we've just spent a whole month of really focused core work. And right now we're spending a whole month on really focused, in the straddle pathway and working on hip mobility and hamstring mobility, which makes it easier to invert, especially if you got a big butt like some of us do. So all of that coming together created this envelope of space around what she was attempting technically. And when she started to explore that, there was more there. There was more available. And bringing it back to freestyle and flow, thinking about Summit, I do think conditioning is really, really helpful, because if you're training technically sort of within, this outer layer of your capability, which you should be, as a coach, I do not want you to do things that are at the very tippitiest edge of your physical capability on the equipment, especially because I can't hold your butt. We're working online. Please work within your comfortable range of mobility, for example. And I know different people have different tolerance levels for that, but that's my preference as a teacher and a coach. But
I'm one of those coaches. If I'm coaching in person, and I don't remember where online, but I remember someone being upset about this. So I'm saying it's me. I do this. I am the coach that a lot of times is sitting in a chair because I do not need to be spotting. It's aerial. You're on silks. What am I going to do? Am I going to catch you? I don't think so. That would just hurt me too. I'm not going to do that. And I have to preserve my own body.
yes.
So I take my own self-care very, very seriously as a coach. And that was my little diatribe there.
No, I appreciate that. And I think spotting on pole tends to just be a little bit of a different beast, because usually your feet are on the ground as well, right? Like, it's more about bringing your body towards the pole so that you can grab on yourself, and less stopping momentum that exists, ideally.
In aerial, it's a lot more dangerous for the coach. I mean, it's still, that danger exists for pole instructors as well, because you can always get kicked in the face. But there are some extra layers with aerial.
Yeah.
I interrupted you, and
no,
now I don't remember
okay.
what you were saying.
I was rewinding it back in my head. Yeah, I think that's something to consider as well, as like, if we want to be able, like, as a group, to keep doing pole and aerial and continue to have spaces to do that, being able to maintain those spaces and teach needs to be like a viable job that people can do that pays them enough to live on. Slight tangent, something that I discovered recently that I find horrifying is, so there's a pole professional organization for people who are professionals in the pole industry. I don't know why I said that both ways. And they released a survey, and 70% of studio owners do not pay themselves. Which means
I just saw, this is even unrelated. Yesterday, I was in, I think it was the instructors owners Facebook group, and it was a person talking about considering quitting their day job to go all in full time for their aerial studio, and whether or not, it was just a question about, is this a good idea or not? And the comments were all what you just said. They were, yeah, it's working out great, but I have a supportive partner who takes care of all the bills. Or I started making money in 3 years, but I had a supportive partner who was taking care of the bills. Not a single person in the thread was really making much money at all, but absolutely weren't making enough money to survive without someone else there.
Yeah.
So this is not, this isn't viable.
No. And it's something that I do, I don't know, just worry about, as someone who wants to do that. it's hard to compete if a lot of businesses are being subsidized by basically free labor. But B, like, I don't know. I got lots of other thoughts on that. Going back, what I was talking about, right? So building capacity, staying within that sort of like envelope. But if you're staying within that envelope and you're continuing to build that envelope, as you freestyle, when you sort of like bump up against the edge of what you can do technically, and you still have capacity left, if you've been training lots of different things, if you like, you know, repetition without repetition, if you've been doing repetition with variation, if you have a lot of input and a lot of ways that you know to get into and out of things, I think easier to explore those pathways on pole than something like silks. For me personally, at least, I don't like silks. I find them super fiddly. Personal opinion. I don't enjoy them as an apparatus, and I also don't like the way they feel sensorily on my hands. I think they look great. It's just not for me. But
this is just a gentle reminder to everyone that although aerial apparatuses have aerial in them, you do not actually have to be in the air to move with your apparatus. So just like pole, you don't have to be inverted to be doing pole, right?
that's true.
And I think that that's part of the problem that people have with flow or freestyle when it comes to aerial, is because they're not working in their capacity, like well below their maximal capacity to be able to get out of their own heads. It just seems impossible. But they're not starting from the place where they actually do, you know, have capacity, which is standing on the ground.
Yeah.
Everyone makes it a lot harder on themselves.
Yeah, it is interesting because I've sort of trained both. Floor work is very much like a accepted basic part of pole that you're going to get as a beginning pole student, and I think should be, right? It's something that, you know, I teach regularly. I think it's necessary and important. But if I think about like the sort of floor-based movement that I've done in aerial spaces, it's been like hand balancing, tumbling, hard shit. And I should say some dance apparatus stuff, also using the floor, which has perhaps not coincidentally been my favorite thing to explore in aerial spaces.
Yeah, I think that I was lucky that I've been exposed to that sort of from the beginning, which is starting not in the first places that I trained, because I started at the trapeze school in DC, but very soon after that was exposed to more of the dance trapeze, very aerial dance side of things. And then from there moved into rope, but even the rope that I started with was from someone who was a classical Indian dancer who was fusing more contemporary style with Malakam. So all of the way that I learned foundationally rope was from an aerial dance place, not a circus place. So I very much think about the ground and how accessible that is for people, perhaps in a different way than other people do.
Yeah. I also am a big fan of the ground. Love the floor. Like it a lot.
I'm also not like a big drop person. So, and I've never been. I think I remember when I first started training, kind of the big sign of success in the classes that I was in, my aerial silks classes, was a double star. It was like, when you hit a double star, you've made it. That and a straight arm inversion. Those are the two things. And I'm pretty sure I did it once and like, that was it. Okay, I did that. I'm not an adrenaline junkie in that way. So I didn't feel called to perfect it. I didn't feel like, oh, I need to add on top of it. But some people that's what excites them about aerial. And so we're all different.
Oh, yeah, that's very true. And I don't know, I've personally spent a lot of time. Hmm, I'm trying to look for a word other than problematizing. Problematizing, certainly for myself. You know, this internal goalpost that I feel like I have to meet to feel worthy and good at something, and like it's worth sharing. And I would like to say, your experience of your pole journey or aerial journey, your experience of it is always going to be more important than other people's experience of it, unless of course you're a professional performer. But I don't think any of my students are currently, to my knowledge, performing professionally, and that's not what I'm training people for. So if they are, it is as an added bonus. It's not what I'm helping them do. So trying to tie your enjoyment of something onto someone's external expectations of what you should, in quotes, be able to do, I think is a recipe for a lot of heartbreak and not feeling great about yourself. And working on unlearning that is very, very hard. But I personally have found it to be a very useful thing to work on. And that said, if that's what you find super motivating, if you're like, I need somebody externally to tell me what my specific goal is, and then I'm going to work towards that, and that's what makes me wake up in the morning and feel happy and fulfilled, by all means do it. But I think it's worth interrogating, is that making you feel happy and fulfilled, or is it just giving you a direction so that you don't have to think about things?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And for people that work with me in the conclave, that's my kind of 3-month container for skill acquisition, where I ask people, what are your 2 goals for this cycle? There are also a lot of other questions in there around, why is that your goal? Let's unpack that a little bit. How do you want this goal to make you feel?
Yeah.
Because most of the time, what people are searching for, um, you could pick any goal, right? It's really not about the skills. It is about something deeper.
Mm.
Um, and that also sort of ties back to why the summit, because for me, I have been doing this over 15 years now. My why has changed a lot over that time. Also, I started later in life. So my why, at 35 is different than a why from someone who's 15. And so in the beginning of aerial, it was very much grounded in this kind of self-determination theory. Like it made me feel good, made me feel accomplished. I could do these things with my body. But now my why is different. I am much more concerned about how it makes me feel every day.
Yep.
And my capacity for ignoring the aches and the nags and the tweaks is very low. Because I want to feel good. I want to feel good throughout my day, and I want to feel good when I'm training. And that's where I think that giving people, having a broader conversation around this about paying attention to how something makes you feel gives people not only more understanding of their own bodies, but like it adds more to their life in general, other than just a trick.
Oh.
And if we can bridge that gap between, cool things with doing cool things with our bodies and like a lifelong practice that makes us feel good as human beings, then we've, achieved something much greater. And as coaches, we've given people so much more. So that the summit is really an expression of that.
And I think that's a beautiful sentiment to end on. Could not agree more. I think many of my students will be like, hey, Rosie said similar stuff in the past. Yeah, there's a reason I'm at this summit. Well, hopefully I'll see you all there. If you're listening to this in the future and you're like, oh no, I totally missed it, will people be able to buy the VIP and go back and watch the recordings afterwards?
Yes, the VIP pass sales will be open until the Friday after the summit, and then they will close. It's possible it may be reopen again, but try to get on it before that Friday because I can't guarantee anything.
So you heard it. Don't wait around too long. Jump on it. Links below, and I'll be reminding you as well. My talk's on Monday, so if you're a little bit late to it, you can still come meet. But then you'll miss all the other great talks, and that would be sad. So, thank you so much for joining, Jessica. I look forward to talking with you more at the summit, and of course at some point in the future. And thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. We'll be back on our regular schedule, so another episode next week, an embarrassment of riches. Thanks so much. I'll talk to you later. Bye. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something. If you want to do more research on your own, if we talked about specific studies, I always try to have the citations in the show notes so you can check them out for yourself. A great place to continue our learning. Speaking of continuing your learning, if you do want to work with me as a pole instructor, I teach online at my online studio, Slink Through Strength, and it would be great to have you come join us. I teach freestyle flow, I teach conditioning, I teach flexibility, and I teach pole in the nerdiest way possible. But we have a good time, and we'd love to have you join us if that sounds like fun for you. And if not, no worries. Either way, I'll see you in the next episode. Have a good one.